Hey, it's Lauren. Just a heads up, there is a bit of language in this episode. This episode has been brought to you by the Raw Spirit Team. Building a business can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. We teach small and medium-sized businesses strategies for building a profitable, successful, stress-free business and life. Because guess what? You are more than your business. Through one-on-one training, online courses, and monthly guest experts, the Spirit Team is built on the principle of building each other up in business and in spirit. Try it for 14 days for free. Just head to rawrawconsulting.com and check out the Raw Spirit Team. Hey, it's Lauren here from the Raw podcast. My guest on the show today is Hayley Soffe, and she is a clear brand expert. Let me tell you, this girl basically gave us a masterclass in a whole podcast. So if you are curious about branding, if you are, even at the very, very inception of your business where you're looking at, coming up with your business name, if you are looking at rebranding, if you're looking at dealing with a designer and not sure where to go, if you have questions on copyright images, we cover it all in this super powerful, charged up episode. So let's get right to it, because believe me, you got to have your pen and paper ready. It is a good one. I'm Lauren, and welcome to the Raw podcast. Hayley Soffe is a graphic designer with 18 years experience, from print to digital to marketing, websites, copywriting, branding. Her extensive background includes spending 2 years freelancing in London for some of the biggest creative agencies in the world. She actually worked on the experiential design for the 2012 Olympics, designing the artist salon, working with PlayStation London's games designers to come up with interactive experience for their Book of Spells tour, working with an entertainment agency designing immersive festival experiences for brands who collaborate with international artists such as Jessie J and Snoop Dogg. Love name dropping, love it. And many more exciting projects. I've asked Hayley today to join me to talk about the do's and don'ts of branding, how to build businesses, from everything from choosing a name to, designing their logo and everything in between, and how to stand out in a competitive space. Hayley, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be here.
I love reading my guest bios because usually, I sometimes screw it up entirely, as I did the first take here. Our listeners at home won't know that I screwed up the first take. I'm going to edit that out. So,
the beauty of that. Yeah, exactly.
But, it's so impressive, to see what, people have been doing with their time. And, I think one of the coolest things that I find is that as you get older, you can say things like, I have 2 decades of experience in XYZ, or I've done, all of these incredible things, really, it's a whole lifetime, isn't it?
Well, shit, it is. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm so old now. But, even hearing my bio read back to me, it's just like, holy shit, I've done this stuff. This is awesome. I have a lot to be proud of. And I think you forget about that along the way. So yeah, I think it's good to take time, reflect, have gratitude for where you've got to and how you've got there. And I think with my journey, it's been it was not the path that I thought I was going to take, but ultimately it's been the best, most beautiful path I could have ever asked for. And oh gosh, I'm getting all goosey and emotional, but just really thankful. So I thought I might start with how I actually got here. So
sure.
I think what happens, when you're at school and in your teenage years, you think you know what you want to be when you grow up. And for so many years, I thought I wanted to be an architect. And so I designed my whole school career around that. And then when I finally got out of school and I went to study architecture, I realized within 2 weeks, I was like, wow, this is not the course they sold me. Like, where's all the like model building and, the fun drawing stuff and, landscape design and what have you. And there was none of that. They just said, it's quite a technical based course, lots of physics, law, maths. And I'm like, that is not what I'm about. So I had to rethink my entire career, and so what I did, instead of just going out and getting, a hospo job, which I think most people end up doing if they don't know where they're going, I thought I'll at least do something that will give me some life skills and some business skills without having to invest too much time and money. So I did this business studies and technology course. It was only 6 months, and I could start on that day, which was perfect. And I found that it really resonated with me. It was an easy course for me to do, but I still gave it my all. I didn't slag off or anything. And I didn't realize until at the very end that there was a company looking for their best students to offer a job to. And so I went for the interview, and I got the job. I was like, oh, this is amazing. So I think the lesson in that was, no matter how good you think you are for something, always do your best, because you never know who's watching.
Yeah. And that actually goes with everything in life, doesn't it? Always do your best.
Definitely. Always give 100%, whether you're mowing lawns or making coffees. I think just having that integrity and, that expectation of yourself, as soon as you start slaking off, then it's just a slippery slope. So always try and do your best, I think. So, and then from that job, because ultimately I wanted to do something designery, but I didn't know what it was. I happened to see their advertising bill one day, and I thought, oh, I can do this stuff. I've got Photoshop on my machine at my desk. And they said, yeah, go for it. Have some fun with it. We've got some brochures you can do and what have you. So I started just playing around and learning a bit about corporate design. And then I thought, you know what, I think I can do this for reals. So a friend of mine said, look, there's a job going at a real estate firm. It's just doing templated work, but, it could be a foot in the door in the direction you want to go. So I went for the interview, and the lady got me to do some testing, and she's like, whoa, you're the fastest and you're the best we've had so far. I just want to offer you the job on the spot. I'm not allowed to, but I want to. Anyway, got the job, and then I spent a year doing that, learnt more about the design software and what have you. And then after a year, I thought, you know what, I think I'm ready to move on. So another friend of mine said, oh, there's a job going down at the print house around the corner. I know that the CEO will put you in touch. And so I had an interview with him, and he's looking at my work. He's like, you're really good. You could be working at an advertising agency. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm quite ready for that. I'm keen to learn some more about, the industry and printing in particular, because it's such a crucial part of knowing graphic design, knowing how to set a job up for print. So I accepted his job and did that for a year. Learned so much about commercial printing, and also working with a multitude of different clients. And then after a year, I was like, oh, I think I've reached the ceiling of this job. What else could there be? And one of the ladies I was working with said, oh, there's a company around the corner who's looking for a salesperson and someone to manage their studio. I was like, oh yeah, I could give that a go. So walked on in with my portfolio, no appointment, and I just said, hey, I hear there might be a job going. And she's like, oh, cool, yeah, let's have a meeting. And in the end, I ended up running her agency for her. She had a couple of things on the go, so she didn't have time for the design business, nor did she even know what she was doing with it. So it was the perfect opportunity for me to really prove my worth, and also use it as a practice run for my own business eventually. So my skills from doing that business studies course came into play in that job, because I was doing invoicing as well. So yeah, you just never know where these skills are going to come up. But I actually thought I was ready to go on my OE, and there was one other job that I had applied for along the way that me and my friend went for, and he ended up getting it. And I was so gutted, because I really wanted to work for this company, but the timing wasn't right. And I was about to go on my OE, and we met for lunch. And next thing, I'm getting a call from the lady who interviewed me saying, hey, Hayley, just wondering, how you are, and I might have a business opportunity for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was thinking about going overseas, but I'll hear you out. And and she said, look, I really love what you do. I appreciate your skill set. You've got account management skills now, and you do graphic design and all this stuff. And she's like, I want to create a role for you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Do I work for this dream company that I've been, wanting to work for so long, or do I go on my OE? I was like, oh, you know what? Like, I think with a bit more experience under my belt, this could actually do really well for my OE and my career in London. So I went and worked for her for 4 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And what kept me there was just the amazing culture this company brought. They really invested in their staff members. Like, they really invested in what our dreams were. Our mental health, our well-being, because they were in the mental health sector, a non-government organisation in New Zealand. And so they really valued us, and I felt like I had a really healthy work-life balance. But they did this exercise with us. It was a creative exercise, and like, they didn't care so much about you working for them. It was more about, what do you want for you and your personal development. And so I wrote down, they said, write down your greatest imaginable dream, and don't put a filter on it. Just, what is your greatest imaginable dream? And mine was traveling the world, earning the British pound while doing graphic design. And I looked at it, I was like, there's no way that's going to happen. Like, I've got a partner who's got kids. He can't travel with me. I'm pretty much stuck in Hamilton, New Zealand. Like, okay, how am I going to make this work? So I took a couple of steps back from that, and I was like, okay, well, maybe what I could do is save $10,000, go on a 6-week holiday with him, and then come back. That might just sort of satiate that need. And 2 months later, after having been in a relationship for 9 years with this guy, I find out he's still seeing his ex-wife. And my whole world just crumbled. And I just, it was the weirdest feeling. Like, everything I knew, I questioned. And as frightening as it was at the time, it was the most freeing experience. And this is the universe's way of delivering my order, because it allowed me to go and chase that dream. And I didn't even have to chase it that hard, which is the weirdest thing. My sister called me up, and she's in London. She's like, Hayley, get your butt over here. Like, come and live with me. Don't worry about a thing. We'll figure it out as you come. And so I arrived, and I couldn't find a job as a graphic designer. I tried for 3 months, and I was running out of money. I was like, what do I do? And I'd listed myself with all these different agencies to temp. I didn't care what kind of design work it was. And there was one job that said, we need a PowerPoint graphic designer. And I was like, I learned PowerPoint in that business studies course I did. I could definitely use that alongside my graphic design skills.
Yeah.
And as soon as I messaged them, they called me and they said, when can you get in here? I was like, well, I'm kind of free now. So they said, yep, come in. It was a Sunday. And they said, right, you're leading this pitch for Vodafone. We've got 24 hours to turn this around, basically. We need as much time as you can give it. And I ended up working through the night. It actually ended up being a 27-hour shift. Through the night, they were feeding me coffee and croissants and pizza and what have you. Like, can we get you anything else to keep you going? I was like, no, I'm good. I've got this. I haven't worked for 3 months, so I've got all this energy. And yeah, so that was my first job with this company, the Omnicom Media Group, which is the second biggest agency in the world. And my 2 years that I was in London, I freelanced with them a couple of times. They really valued the fact that I gave it my all, and they said, yeah, we need a girl like this on our team. So worked for them, did the work, as you said, like for the experiential agencies as well, which I love because it's a bit of interior design, a bit of architecture, just really immersive, it really sort of touches on all those senses. So I love doing that. That's probably my passion, actually. But it's not a job that comes up often, especially back over here. Anyway, so I finished my OE. I actually took a bit of a career break and worked as a chef in Menorca with my best friend. And we ended up cooking for a couple of people who were quite high up in the industry, somebody who was a caterer for the biggest catering company in London, and we ended up almost killing her through cooking these chilies that she was allergic to. Whoops. And we also cooked for Kate Winslet's family, her partner's family. So that was cool. So yeah, that was an awesome career break actually. But I was ready to get back on that horse, and I was back in Australia, and I was like, well, I don't have any work here. What do I do? And I contacted my agency, and I said, thinking, I worked through the night that time, and they're always working to deadline. They basically can't let the work stop. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I could offer to be based in Australia, doing the work during my day here, and they can go to sleep in the middle of the night, they can actually have a sleep, and I'll do the work while they're asleep. And they're like, holy moly, that's like the best idea ever. And they were going through this pitch for Disney at the time, and it was a 6-week pitch, and it just worked perfectly. And I was earning the pound being based in Australia. I was like, wow, this is cool. And then I thought, I'm going to get a little bit cheeky with this, and I'm going to say, do you mind where I'm based? And they said, no, not at all. Like, as long as you get the work done, meet the deadlines, that's what we're happy about. We don't care where you are. So yeah, ever since then, that was 2013, I've been a digital nomad, and I've based myself in, gosh, I've actually been to about 53 different countries with having, this job. And it was all from, allowing the universe to provide for me that solution. And also just taking every opportunity that came up and using it to my, the best of my advantage, I suppose. So yeah, you never know when these little things will come back, and how the pieces come together.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, now that I'm in, with the whole COVID thing, obviously I couldn't travel, and I was on my way to Bali to set up a co-working business for digital nomads like myself, because loneliness is a factor.
Yeah.
And I got kind of stuck, I suppose, in the Sunshine Coast, and it's just been the best thing for me. I haven't been working so much with my clients in the UK because they've had to close their doors for a while. And it's got me back into the whole branding side of things, which is what we're talking about today.
Yeah. I love that. I love your story. One of the things that I got out of your story, Hayley, was about your ability to go with the flow. And also what I got from that as well was that you are clearly somebody who clearly is ridiculously talented, but you're also well liked because you had a lot of people backing you up and introducing you and giving you opportunities. And I believe that like attracts like. So the more opportunities that you're presented with was clearly an indication of, the person that you are. And I love that, while you're sharing your story, you have this gratitude about it. And you're very matter of fact about moving on after a year. a commitment thing there. But I like how at the same time you're aware that, there's a cap and there's a ceiling here, and
feeling exactly that.
Yeah. And often if you're working for someone else, there's always going to be a ceiling. And, I've got to say that it's quite something as well, just to go back to that business you worked with in New Zealand, the mental health one that was really supportive of you there. It's quite a rarity almost in business culture, my experience of seeing businesses that operate like that, because I think that very often it's a dog eats dog world sometimes in the corporate world. And it's not about how can I motivate my employee to be the best version of themselves. It's, how can I keep the people here doing the job for the cheapest amount of money, or how can, my friends continue to rise to the top where other people aren't. And culture isn't always the most important thing. Anyway, that really stood out for me just in our conversation.
Absolutely. I have such respect for the people that ran that business. They're quite a spiritual based organization as well, which is amazing. And they are the biggest non-government organization in New Zealand, doing amazing things for mental health. They don't believe in using medication, and everything is about talking therapies, which is just beautiful. Because I think a lot of this, the mental health experiences people have these days, a lot of them come from trauma. And I think there's finally conversations around that. People are talking more about the stuff that happened to them that has created this reaction in their brain as a survival mechanism. And I think, oh, there's just so much in it. I mean, gosh, that's a whole nother topic itself. But I love that they started doing this back in 2000, and I started with them in 2007. They were very forward thinking in a lot of things. They had an organic business, they had a natural business, and it was all about like social enterprises and giving people with mental health issues jobs, getting them back into the community, which is cool. But just everything that they offered us as well. Like, we were probably the highest paid in our industry. We had 3-day weekends, 9-day fortnights, so we could just use that time during the 9 days to work, to do the job that we had to do, but we had time and space to do it, to allow time for, dropping kids off to school or whatever it was. If you're a morning person, then you can start early, finish early. If you're not a morning person, you can start late, finish late, And we had an organic chef who would cook all vegan meals, and they would only charge us $1 for that. And massages for $1. It was just, we had it all, really. So
wow. Well, maybe after the call, you can tell me more about that, because I'd love to interview them on the show, because that's, people like that, businesses that run in that way really need to be profiled, and I would love to have that discussion. So maybe we can continue that conversation off this call, because I am aware of time that you and I can obviously talk around.
There's so much there. Yes, let's get focused.
Yeah, let's get focused. Let's get back on topic here, which is on brand. Let's get back on brand.
Okay, on brand.
So first of all, I guess I want to know, do you have to be artistic to be a designer?
Well, I think for me it was a natural ability, but I think, like all things, they can be learned. And what I've put together today is a few tips and tricks. And I think some things, you can follow a bit of a formula to come up with these solutions. So maybe if you follow some of my advice, you can come up with a concept yourself to actually present to a graphic designer, and maybe they take it, to the next level for you. But half the work's done, and you've got that vision in mind that you can translate to them. So,
well, I'll ask you about your tips and tricks in a minute. But before we get into that, how important do you think, a brand is to the success of a business? Have you ever seen a business succeed with a shitty brand?
No,
Okay.
Most definitely not. And even just, from my perspective as just a normal consumer, I will judge a brand, I'll judge a company by their branding, and especially their web design. There's nothing worse than turning up to a website and it's like the colors are all weird and the fonts are all weird, and there's no cohesiveness and there's no flow to it. You can't navigate. You're like, what is this company even about? Who are they? Or it looks like it's been designed in the 1990s, that sort of stuff all stands out to me. And I'm just like, red flags. No, I don't think they know what they're doing, because clearly they don't. If they knew what they were doing, they probably had enough money to actually invest in themselves. And I think with everything in life, it's about invest in yourself first. If you invest in yourself, others will invest in you.
I think sometimes when you're starting a business, there are so many things to buy and purchase and people's services to ask, or not to ask, but to essentially hire. And the more that I do this podcast, the more that every time I'm talking to professionals like you, I keep going, damn, that would be a good investment, or that would be a good investment. And I think that, often people think, oh, well, I can just do this part on my own, without realizing that it could be affecting their ROI or costing them, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the end. Because I know I looked at one woman's website one time, and she was selling luxe products, and she was building the site herself, and you could tell. And I just thought there was such a disconnect between her products she was trying to sell and, the fact that she wasn't investing in her shop front, i.e. her website.
Absolutely, because that's the foot in the door. That's what people are going to judge you on. You might have the most amazing service or product, but no one's going to give you the chance unless, you show it off in a nice way. Not nice, but
in a professional way.
Well, professional. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you're definitely right there.
One of the things you do as well with clients is you actually help them from their inception, i.e. figuring out their business name and then all the way into the brand process. So can we start at the beginning for a second? Because I did see, someone online the other day, they were trying to figure out their business name. And for me, coming up with a business name has always been not too difficult. I just kind of, I don't know, it just sort of happens for me. Just,
That's good.
lucky
Yeah.
me. But for other people, I suggested that she did a word bubble of sorts, where you have words that all tie in with the services that you're doing and see if you can combine anything. How do you help somebody come up with their business name and have it be something also that's unique, considering there's so much out there?
Absolutely. I think that's the best way to start. I think right from the beginning, start as you mean to continue. Start as if you're going to be this massive, big, company, because you don't want to have to revisit this process again.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot, like as soon as you start, it's just going to flow into everything you do. So get it right first time. So yes, starting with a business name, crucial. And because there's so many business names out there that are already taken, already being used, you have to come up with something that's unique to you. And I think when you're focusing on your particular set of your particular offering, like what is unique, what is your USP, what is your unique selling point? So whether it's words that describe your business, who you are, practically what do you do, and then maybe creative words, like use a thesaurus to come up with creative words based on those basic words that you've come up with, mix a couple of things together. And just play around with a few things. And maybe if you've got a Facebook page, pop it up there and just, get other people's feedback, or say, this is the brief, this is what I'm doing, or this is what I do. Does anyone have any ideas on, what I could call my business? So you could put it out to your Facebook networks. But once you do come up with a name, there's a bit of a process. So you'll have to check to see if it's being used already, particularly in your city, but definitely like in your country as well, because when people are online Googling, you don't want them to find someone, your competitor, for instance.
Yeah.
And you also have to register your business name with your local tax office. So for us, it's the ATO. And there's a company name search that you can do on there to see if anyone else is using your name. And if they are, then it's like, well, okay, let's add something to the end of that to make it significantly different enough. It could just be one word difference. And then check for domain names as well, the availability. So it could be a .com, .com.au, .net, .org, whatever. As long as it's unique to you, get that domain signed, sealed, and delivered. Buy it so no one else can take it. So that means when you start doing your branding exercise, someone's not going to come and snap up that domain name and then it completely ruins where you're going with your branding.
Do you think in this day and age, Hayley, it matters whether it's a .com, a .com.au, or .net?
Definitely not. I think generally speaking, these days people are clicking on links anyway. They're not necessarily having to type them in. And if they are typing them in, it might be off your business card, but they'll see it's .net, .org. So .com's nice to have because it's a worldwide domain name.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're only focusing on Australia, for example, then .com.au is a usual one to get and probably more familiar for your audience. But if you're going international, I'd say try and get something that is unique first and then a .com.
Yeah.
But also, register a couple of different options as well, just because then you can have, if people are accidentally typing in .com or .com.au or .net, it's still going to go to your website.
Yeah, okay.
So then once you've got your business name down pat, then you can start working on your logo. So when it comes to a logo, I think some people overthink it and they think, oh, I need to show exactly what I do all in a logo. I've got to have icons and all my colors and all these fancy fonts, and actually when it comes to a logo, simple is better. And this is where a graphic designer comes in, because you might start with something that's quite busy and out there, but the key is doing development, where you develop the logo into something that is just simple, to the point, encapsulates everything you do just in this one small little logo, and that's your brand mark. So a common approach these days is what we call a word mark, which is just using fonts to show what you do, or create the logo as such, not using a whole lot of icons. You can, but a word mark's fine as well. And when you're designing it, I would suggest only using 1 to 2 colors, and I always go for one color and one neutral. So it could be, say, pink and gray, or pink and black, or pink and white, and you always have an opposite color as well. So like the white version will be to be used on a dark background. So when you're keeping your logo simple, it means that you can start building a fun brand around it that is relevant to the fashion or the trends that are happening at the moment. So like I'll use your branding as an example. So your logo is one color, but it allows you to add a whole awesome color palette to that without it clashing. You know what I mean? It complements your logo. Because a logo is not something you want to have to be redesigning often.
Yeah. Can I go back, Hayley, for a minute, just about business names? Because I before we got into the logo, I forgot to ask you. Sometimes I see people and they have business names, and I hate this. This actually like really irritates me. And I'm sorry to our listener at home if this is you. I don't mean it as a personal thing. It's like when they spell things with the wrong letters because they're trying to be clever. So for example, Karen's Crackers, that I just made that up. I didn't actually, I'm sure there is a Karen's, but with K's,
Right.
do you have any thoughts on that? Because sometimes people are trying to be overly clever, and I just think it makes it really hard for their SEO.
Well, yeah, I guess it could do. It's tricky because I understand. I mean, there's a couple of ways you could go with that. One is it could be hard for people to find your brand if you're not spelling it the obvious way. I mean, the alliteration of that. I mean, you could do something quite cool with the 2 Ks in your design, so that could work. Also, it helps create a different name which might not already be used. So I don't know. I could go both ways on that one.
Okay, I like that. That's a good answer. It's good because, it's important to understand. And I think one of the reasons why I like doing these podcasts is because everyone is different of opinion. And it's important to figure out, I think, what resonates with you and go, yeah, that feels good to me, and move along with that. And, sometimes you get difference of opinions in a variety of things. So,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, who's right? Who knows?
I mean, it could
you're
just
right
speak
because
your personality
you're the expert.
better. So. Yeah, just one of many.
All right, so let's get into some of the top tips about designing your brand, because I know you've got quite an extensive list there, and I know that I'll have some questions in relation to that. You did already talk a little bit about the logo and the importance of understanding that you don't need to cram everything into your logo. And one thing I do want to mention is that, when you were talking about keeping your logo simplified, I find it quite fascinating, and I have done very beginner design myself. So I understand, I can, relate to you in that little bit, but that people think that just because it's simple makes it easy. And I actually think that's not true.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's where graphic designers are very clever. Like, yeah, keep it simple. But it's quite hard to get to that point. It's a lot of like, okay, I don't need this necessarily. I don't need this to be so, out there or crazy. I could simplify this down, and I don't know, simple is always better, I think. In a lot of ways.
I find sometimes it's almost as though if a normal person, and I say normal in the sense of not marketers, not people who are trying to pay attention to analyze things, if it's not difficult for them to read or it's not jarring in any way, it's a good design. Because sometimes I've looked at things before and it just irks me. Like it just looks cheapened, or it looks dated, or it's too much, or they're trying to, kind of what you're going back to, cram everything in.
Definitely.
And it ends up having the wrong effect. In fact, it makes it uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And, maybe it is better to invest in a graphic designer, at least for the logo. I think it's very important. And even typography. You could choose a script font, for example, but script fonts tend to date very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's why I tend to go with a sans serif font. So sans serif fonts are the fonts that don't have all the bits on them. So if you remember Times New Roman from, when we were younger and on WordPress or whatever it was, on Microsoft Word, it's a very old looking font these days.
Yeah.
But that it still has a relevance in industries like maybe, I don't know, legal businesses. It's more that traditional kind of font, but it doesn't look so flash in logos these days. It looks like it's old and not considered. And also with sans serif fonts, they are a lot more, they're cleaner, they're easier to read, definitely better for web use as well. Like, it's been proven that using a sans serif font is easier for the reader to read because they're not getting distracted by all these little bits that are hanging off the font. And at the end of the day, you need to be able to communicate your message in the clearest way possible. So that goes for copy as well as logo design.
Yeah, that's funny because when you think about fonts, I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes I'll look at somebody's font, and if it's a script font, I can't always tell what it says.
Well, that's true. Again, it's about being able to communicate your message clearly. So that's a massive consideration. If you want to use a script font, maybe you use it as a heading, and it's a large heading, it's very clear to read. And it's okay to use two fonts in your branding. Like I would use a different kind of fun heading font for something, and then you always have a very clear, basic copy font, body copy font. But more than two, it just looks busy and it just looks unconsidered. So again, less is more.
Yeah. Do you think in a poster design, for example, you can have two fonts, but then have different sizes? Is that confusing to the reader or jarring, or is it okay because you're using the same font, even though it might appear to be different?
I think that's okay. And so when we're using different font sizes and different fonts, it's invoking emotion, but it's also showing hierarchy of information. So when somebody's looking at your poster, for example, the first thing they'll want to see is a nice big title that encapsulates exactly what this poster is trying to sell or inform you about. So it grabs the reader's attention. It's like, oh, cool, that's, this band's playing or whatever. And then you kind of reduce the font size based on the information you need them to understand. So I guess font size sort of denotes the importance of the information.
Right. Because even though we love our own website, frankly, people have their own lives that they're living. They're not going to spend the next half an hour reading yours necessarily.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And you've only got about 2 seconds to convert someone. So when they land on your website, you're like, okay, I've got to basically say in a paragraph exactly what I do, what you're here for, what I can offer you before they'll click away. And I think subconsciously we're also judging their design. So that's why simple is better.
Yeah.
Make sure your message and your intention stands out first and foremost, and then lead them into the detail.
Yeah. Okay. So you've talked a bit about, keeping the logo simple, keeping the logo one color. If you're using two colors, to have, maybe a neutral as well as a colorful color, I guess. You've talked about simplifying your fonts, how sans serif fonts are helpful, especially because they don't have all the flourishes that other fonts have. They're easier to read. You've talked a little bit about as well, not having more than two fonts, but that if you're increasing the size, that does help us with the hierarchy, which I thought was really well explained. Do you have some more tips and tricks, Hayley, that you would be willing to share with our listener at home in relation to maybe starting a brand, or if people are looking to even rebrand? Because what I find happens sometimes is when we talk to people like you, all of a sudden it's like the wheels start turning. I'm sure somebody at home is going, wait a minute, I've been using my own personalized logo I made, back in the 2000s.
Definitely. I think there's, in this day and age, there's websites like Fiverr, which is spelled with 2 R's. And it's basically graphic designers looking for jobs. So you could go to that site and say, here's my brief. And you'll have maybe, I don't know, say 5 to 50 graphic designers all vying for your job to be paid for their logo design that they're going to be giving you. So you could have, 50 logos to choose from all these designers, but you only pay for the one that you go with. So that's actually a really affordable way of doing it and getting a whole lot of options. And then, with the brand, you can have some fun with that yourself. So you can choose your own color palette with what maybe resonates with you, what works for the personality of your brand. So one thing that I learned from that company in New Zealand, actually, so rather than having a mission statement, they would, because we designed all these different brands, each brand would have a personality. So it's like, okay, what is the character of this brand? Is it playful? Is it fun? Is it serious? Write down a list of attributes, and then write down the values of that brand. Like, what does this brand always do? What will it never do? How does it sound? How does it talk? And so you're giving your brand a character, so that if anyone was to work on your brand, they know exactly how to come across. And especially in copywriting, do you want to have a playful kind of fun, personalized sort of approach to your listener or reader, or do you want them to take you seriously? So it all comes down to the personality of your brand. So I think that's quite a cool exercise to do.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
And then, like the color palette, again, colors, the psychology of colors, there's so much in that. And I'd recommend doing some research on that if you don't already understand the psychology of colors. But I think innately we do, like green is sort of a sense of calm, and it, maybe natural products will be, showcased by a green color. But in saying that, I think we've gone through this phase of, everything has to be natural these days. So, brown and greens were the go-to for those logos and those brands. But now it's like, well, everyone's doing natural. Let's, disrupt the industry. Let's throw some pink in there and, have some fun with it. So It's not always about doing what's been done this whole time, but it's also, you do have to consider your audience and what your product is, and you're still wanting to get that message out there through the look and feel of your brand.
How do you keep a look timeless? Because I know that things become on trend, and I know that, investing in branding can be an expensive pursuit, especially when you consider, and we're going to get into that in a minute as well about web, but when you consider that there's web and there's print and there's, all these other facets where your brand is being showcased, not to mention your merch, or if you go into you have a brick and mortar shop, and then you think about your decals on your car, there's all these things that, play a part. And if you're not, current, then you're going to look dated, and it could have the adverse effect on your brand. But at the same time, you can't be expecting people to continuously rebrand at the same time either, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you maintain that modern kind of balance?
I think that's a really good question. And again, the key is just keeping your logo simple, because the logo is something that you don't want to have to be recreating all the time. So if that's basic and timeless, then that's great. You don't have to touch that again for a long time. But you can keep it fresh through imagery. Like, imagery is such a great way to do it. So imagery and your color palette, it's okay to change that every so often, like say you've got your Facebook page. As long as your Facebook page has your logo, you could change the image that's in behind it. Maybe it's a texture, or maybe it's people, or whatever it is. But I think imagery can date as well. So keep that fresh. I just want to say on that imagery note, you have to be quite careful about using other people's images without, their copyright, because as easy as it is to go Googling for images and just, taking them off Google Images, you have to appreciate that that's someone's work, and that basically everything is assumed to have a copyright. So you can't just go copy and paste it. So the best way to get around the copyright issue, there are a couple of websites that allow you to use their images for free. And that's Pexel, which is PEXEL.com, and Unsplash, UNSPLASH.com. So those two websites are high resolution.
I put a link to those in the show notes as well. And there's also another one. Pixabay is another good one.
Oh, I didn't know about that one. I'm going to put that one down on my list.
And Librestock is another one. That's Librestock. And then I'm sure Hayley was going to say it, but I'm beating her to the punch because I'm talking at the moment. You always want to double check the licensing permissions as well, because sometimes, these things may change. And if you're not double checking on a regular basis, you just, you could get stuck. But, Pexels and Unsplash, I use them all the time. They're fabulous. But I'm sure Hayley will agree with me that the best idea as well for images is actually to create your own original content.
Well, that's absolutely true. Yeah, definitely. I agree. I mean, if you can get a photographer to do a photo shoot for you, or even, a lot of people are doing them themselves these days. People are pretty savvy with their cameras, and now the resolution on cameras is generally okay for anything online. But if you're going to be doing anything for print, it has to be high resolution. So 300 dpi is the minimum for print work. And just be aware that if you enlarge an image, you're actually losing that pixel quality. So your image will look blurred if it's enlarged.
That gets me. And also, people listening, just love ya. But if you're also, going to be editing your logo, hold shift so that you can maintain, the look of the logo, the proportions. Thank you. Because that's
absolutely
bonkers.
Definitely. And there's image formats that you need to be aware of as well. So when you're getting a logo designed, or you're designing a logo, you'll be wanting a vector version of your logo, which basically means it can be scaled without losing resolution, and it means that it doesn't have a nasty white background, which JPEGs have. So always get the vector version, and if you're ever providing it to a printer, that's what you want to give them.
Yes, and vector also can show up like a .eps when you're looking at a file, because sometimes people have sent me logos and they're like, I don't think it's right, I can't open it. No, that's fine. You can't open it. I can.
That's right.
Designers have special programs for that. So that's a great tip, Hayley.
Exactly right. The one that we can use is an SVG file, which is like the new age PNG. So PNGs are transparent generally, and that's what we use on websites because it's it's a small file size. Whereas SVGs are a vectorized version that can be read by web browsers.
Okay.
So you still get that benefit.
How do you recommend people communicate with designers? Because, you're just talking right now in vectors and SVG files. I'm pretty sure somebody has just gotten very confused.
Definitely.
Should you be creating a mood board? Like, I know Canva, you can make your own mood boards. I know Pinterest, you can make your little inspiration boards. Is that kind of a good way to get started? Is there language that people need to know specifically, or
I think that's a great tip, actually. So if you're wanting to engage with a designer yourself, and get them to do the whole job, basically you're trying to get them to understand what's going on in your head, who you are, what you're about, and hopefully they ask the right questions. But it's so helpful for them to know, okay, what kind of things resonate with you. So find some websites that you like the look of, maybe the flow of, similar language that you want to use. You might, see somebody's copy and you're like, oh, I really like how they write, how they're coming across. Imagery, definitely. Colors, definitely. Fonts, other logos you like the look of. I think, as much as you can give to a designer, it'll help them narrow things down and nail exactly what you want. And the way I see ourselves is that we are visual problem solvers. So you give us a problem and we'll solve it visually.
Yeah, I love that. And often I think that the designers, while they're brilliant, they're not freaking mind readers. They don't know necessarily what you mean unless you show them.
Absolutely. And, everyone's got their own ideas and their own taste. And what a graphic designer should do for you is at least give you 2 to 3 different concepts, like different styles, different approaches to your brief. So then you can go, oh yeah, that one definitely is more along the lines of what I was thinking, and I really like that, but can we change a few things? And that's what the development process is there for, is that designer will go away and take on board what you've just told them and hopefully come up with, like a more cohesive solution based on the concept that you've chosen.
When you're hiring a graphic designer, you know, especially when you're hiring somebody who's helping you move your brand forward essentially, and really kind of, get your business out and, for the first time in a lot of people, right? It's your first, the first time you're going to be seeing that business. How important is it to get what you want out of it versus what the designer thinks is best?
Oh, that can be super important because I mean, there's a lot of things that you might not consider because you're not a graphic designer that they can actually bring to the table for you. So they'll be familiar with, what design trends are happening at the moment. They'll do, I mean, it's quite good to do a competitor analysis as well. So figure out who your competition is. So then you can say to the designer, look, this is who we need to beat. This is who we need to be better than. And this is how we can be better because this is my unique selling points.
Do you think that you need to keep different things in mind for web versus social versus print? And I guess when I say print, I sort of mean anything, in terms of card decals, merch, things like that? Or is that yet another category?
I think once you've got a really solid brand designed in the first place, so your graphic designer should basically be able to give you your logo, firm up your color palette, give you some ideas on how to approach like social media and your website, that kind of thing. So once you have like a brand sheet, like just a really quick guide for you, so it'll be like, okay, these are my fonts that I use always. And
Right.
sometimes like websites might have a different font to a print version because we're limited for what fonts websites can read basically. So you might need to have a web safe font, which is used also in Microsoft Office because Office is also limited in what kind of fonts they can use. And also when you're sending things to clients or other people, they might not have that font on their machine, so that whatever you've sent them will not look right. So always good to have a web safe font. And there's a list of those online. And then have a complementary font for print. So it might be a slightly nicer font, but it looks similar.
Okay, I like what you just brought up there. You talked about the brand guide. So I've always referred to that also as a style guide. So imagine they're one and the same.
Yep.
Now, a style guide or brand guide has always been, in my experience, given to me to tell me how to design for a client, or I'll give to somebody else to tell them how to design for me. So, is that a really key thing to have in your business to ensure that consistency? And should that be something that everyone in your business references? Because the ones that I have also have color codes on them, because it's not just red, it's this particular type of red.
That's exactly right. That's a perfect point to bring up. So when you have your color palette, there's 3 different color systems we use. CMYK is for the printers. RGB is for anything web design or on screen, and a hex code is what also some websites will ask for. So if your designer can say, okay, this is the breakdown in CMYK, RGB, and hex, it means no matter who you're working with, they're using those codes relevant to the platform or the media that they're using, and it means that your colors will remain consistent across everything you do. So yes, it's so important to keep that consistency across your brand.
So do you think most designers know to give you that stuff? Or if you're just getting a logo from a designer, surely they're not putting in all the effort that you're talking about. That would be something that, would be a good investment though, right? To get all that information so that you can, if you're already investing in a logo, it makes sense to do the thing right.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really good point. When you're engaging with a designer, make it known that's what you're looking for as well. So they're not only designing a logo, they are designing your brand. And I mean, these are just little, guidelines that you can use potentially for yourself as well. If you want to keep your budget down, as long as you're following these basic rules, at least your brand will have some consistency across the board,
Yeah.
And I think when a designer is designing your logo, they are considering how your greater brand could look. So it makes sense to get that information from them.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So listen, we only have about 5 minutes left of the interview, believe it or not. Anyway, time goes by. It's like sometimes when we're just talking about exciting things like branding and, you know, awesome employers and traveling and stuff like that, Jessie J, it all just trickles on by. So, you know, is there anything, Hayley, that we didn't get to that you really want to make sure that our listeners at home are very clear on this? You've covered off a lot. This has basically been a masterclass of branding. And if you know at home haven't been taking notes, it would be worth going back and listening, because the whole episode is filled with things that you can use to advance yourself.
Absolutely. You know, I've actually put together a quick little tips and tricks sheet that covers pretty much everything we've spoken about. So
Great.
I can share that with you, and then people can use that as a starting point.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to share that.
Thank you so much, Hayley. All right. Well, if there's nothing else to add, I will put a link to Hayley's her tips and tricks sheet in the show notes. Hayley, if people wanted to potentially work with you, talk to you further, is that something that you're open to if I left all your contact information as well in the show notes?
Yeah, people can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm not actively looking for work at the moment.
Because you're in high demand.
I'm also changing my focus a little bit. So
are you?
Yeah. So yeah, I've got a few ideas in mind.
Okay, so that's for another time.
For another day.
No spoiler alerts.
No spoilers.
Does it have to do with your Bali project?
It could do. I mean, gee, I've got quite a few different ideas in mind, but I do love working with people and starting, working with them from the ground up. So it's potentially something that I could help with. So definitely get in touch with me on LinkedIn, and I can let you know about my availability and give you a quote on it, and then we can go from there.
Great. And if anything, I'm sure that Hayley would be able to refer you as well to other people. I'm sure she knows.
Absolutely. Definitely have a nice team of designers that I could put you in touch with.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Hayley. It's been a really interesting conversation. We've covered a lot, and I know you've given a lot of really tangible things that people can act right now, can do right now and implement into their business to advance them forward. So thank you so much for your time.
More than welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please do leave us a review where you listen to your podcast and share it with your friends. New episodes every Monday.